So I watched a Sarah Silverman video last night where she's pretending to go for a sex reassignment surgery to have a penis installed. Because, as she puts it, it's still cheaper than a lifetime vagina tax, as she calls it, referring, of course, to the ever-present wage gap. And she talks in there about how over a lifetime, or on average, women earn 78 cents for every dollar that a man earns. And this, to me, is another one of these arguments that needs to die in a fire. And it seems that irresponsible people like to play to a crowd that's susceptible to hearing this rhetoric and not understanding what's really involved here. I don't think there are any reputable economists that take the wage gap into consideration without taking into consideration all the relevant factors and variables that cause a woman's lifetime earnings, let's say, to be some $500,000 less than a man's lifetime earnings. And of course, there's a very distinct difference between being paid or having a wage and what you earn. Earn is a very complex term, and it has to do with all those variables, such as hours worked, length of time in a given field, a choice of field, time taken away for family pursuits. And to somehow expect that women would earn exactly the same as men would earn over their lifetime and still have family and be a stay-at-home mom even for a few years, take maternity leave, make job choices that reflect a potential for being out of a given field for a particular period of time, and that sort of thing is unreasonable. It's as unreasonable as this idea that a person can have it all. I've heard this even amongst feminists talking about women having it all, having a high-powered career and having a family as well. And you just can't have it all. Everything you do is at the expense of everything else you could be doing at that same time. And if you have a job and a family, you can probably make that work. A high-powered career, which demands generally 50-plus hours of work per week, and usually a very successful high-powered career requires more time than that. 50 hours would be insufficient for many high-powered careers. And to somehow have that in a family, raise children adequately, is not going to happen. I've thought about this myself. Can I have it all? I can't. I run a successful business. I've got an acreage that I have to maintain. I like to make YouTube videos. I've got a basement full of music equipment that I hardly ever visit. I'd love to make more music. I'd like to develop another business that doesn't require me to be so hands-on as my automotive shop for my retirement. I like to go out in the wilderness. I like to motorcycle. I can't have it all. Everything I do comes at the expense of everything else I could be doing at that particular time or with that particular amount of funds. And this is the same with your employment income. And I'm just kind of tired of hearing the wage gap promoted as though it exists somehow in a vacuum. If you can find, and of course this goes right to the top of government, Barack Obama is famous for saying that, men would be complaining. Imagine if you worked 5 days and only got paid for 4, or worked for 4 days and only got paid for 3. Men would be complaining. Well, they probably wouldn't be complaining if they were only actually working 4 of the 5 days and got paid for 4 of the 5 days. And I'm not suggesting, of course, that women work 4 days out of every 5. But what I am talking about is what is the hour gap, hours worked gap over a lifetime between men and women? I think that would be interesting to know. And of course, it's already well documented. I don't need to do it. It's already well documented the different career choices that men and women make. Clearly, women should be paid more for the same job under all the same circumstances. The laws exist to reflect that. In fact, I think there should be less talk about a generic overall wage gap and more focus on finding any employer who is paying a woman less for exactly the same job with all the exact same credentials, time in the field, all the things of an equivalent man, and prosecute those employers. If there really is a vagina tax, it exists on individual bases. You cannot take an overall picture and somehow decide that that's reflective of every individual case. prosecute those employers who are breaking the law. Find them and prosecute them. But don't talk about it in an overall fashion. The funny thing about the Sarah Silverman video, and the thing that actually prompted me to make this video about the gender wage gap, is at one point she talks about donating money to a women's law society. I can't remember the name of it, so you'll have to forgive me. I'll link her silly video below. You can find it for yourself. And that this law firm or law society does things like, trying to even up the wage gap, and also promotes the idea of flexible working hours. So either Sarah Silverman is stupid or she thinks her audience is. Because I'm going to assume here, I'm going to go way, 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 way out on a limb and assume that the flexibility in hours she's talking about are not more overtime hours, right? Not more hours so that they can then earn the same as their male counterparts. I'm pretty sure what she's referring to is more flexible hours so that women can take time off work to go pick up kids from school or daycare or go do whatever it is that they need to do so that they can have, quote unquote, have it all. They can have a family and have a job as well. Well, again, you can have one or the other, but you can't have it all. You can have flexible hours, but you cannot then claim to earn the same or that you deserve to earn the same as a man earns, or is paid, I should say. Right? You can't have both. I'm sorry. And the fact that this would be in a video talking about the wage gap, closing the wage gap, is preposterous. It's at the best it's cognitive dissonance, and at worst it's actually just dishonest. No one deserves to earn the same as someone else. You earn what you deserve. And there's certainly no question in my mind that a woman should be paid the same for the same job with all the relevant factors and variables accounted for and being basically equivalent to what a man makes. It's a no-brainer. We ought to live in a meritocracy. That's how we should determine how people are compensated. But what I find often happens is that when we talk about things on this sort of grand scale, instead of focusing on individual instances where there actually might be a vagina tax or a corporate vagina tax, and dealing with those, is we talk about them on the grand scale. Someone like Barack Obama gets up in grandstands and basically pays lip service to it, and then nothing else happens. And it's sort of like a lot of these terms that get diluted. People have a desire to ever widen the net to encompass everyone. A good example is a term like rape, and they expand the net to cover sort of everybody. And then actual real victims are anonymous nobodies at that point. If you turn everyone into a victim, then the real victims of the severe, brutal sort of version of things are marginalized at that point. And I think what Barack Obama is doing when he gets up and plays to his base by grandstanding on these issues is he's really diluting it. He's paying lip service to it, and it's kind of like people participating in Earth Hour, turn off your lights for an hour a year, and people are sort of led themselves into believing that they've done their part. And the effect that I think this has when it comes to the grandstanding on the wage gap issue is to ensure that actual victims of wage discrimination are obscured permanently. Putting this on the grand stage as though it's some sort of systemic problem now, today, of course, and not focusing on individual instances where a woman actually is paid less than a man for the same job with the same qualifications, etc., 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 is misleading. And to quote Barack Obama in 2015, it's an embarrassment. Thanks for watching.